It's 10:16. We'll call the Sawyer County Administration Committee meeting to order, please. May we have roll call, Madam Clerk?
Reed Schumann.
Here.
Dale Schluter.
Here.
James Schlender.
Here.
Ron Kinsley.
Here.
Tom Duffy.
Here.
Let the record indicate we have a quorum, a full quorum. Thank you all. Certification of compliance with open meetings law.
The meeting has been noticed to the public and news media as required by section 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes. Meeting
Agenda has been presented. Public comment. Anybody here that would like to address the board? Mike, anyone online?
Nobody's online. Keep up with us. Switching links on.
Great. Number 6, approval of minutes from previous meeting, May 13th, 21. Mr. Duffy.
I'll move.
Mr. Schlender. Motion by Mr. Duffy, second by Mr. Schlender to approve the May 13th, 2021 meeting minutes as presented. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 7, Veteran Service Department report. Gary sent us his written report. Are there any questions, concerns? Mr. Kinsley, I know that we had placed the Veteran Service Office on your Public Works agenda in the future to address their needs and address the status of that building, correct?
That is correct.
Anything else? Mr. Hoff, you want to say anything on that? Or not?
No.
Okay. All right, number 8, Information Technology Department report. Mr. Colson.
Thank you. I'll bring up my report here. Just a few things worth mentioning here. We're working with the jail on a camera system replacement. Applied for a grant. Unfortunately, that didn't go through, so we're going to try to get that into the capital improvement project for next year. We had to work with some email services, splitting off this City of Hayward from the Sheriff's Department. That's now complete. This last couple of weeks, we've had to spend a lot of time with the Sheriff's Department and the citations system called TRAX. It requires a lot of hands-on, and we finally got that up and running. We have to reinstall it on a few more machines, and then this next month we'll be working on a conversion to another in-house system. So that's also underway here. Other than that, we'll be planning on some other system upgrades, planning for next year, and budget's always right around the corner, so that's the other thing we're working on. Other than that, the highway shop always seems to have internet issues, and we just got another quote from CenturyLink on that, and so we'll be under discussions with administration and the highway department on that, and hopefully, well, I just shouldn't say hopefully, but we'll see if there's any funding for that through grants.
Mr. Schlender.
Mr. Colson, I really should ask you this question. We had everyone here. You saw the presentations from both Novato and from Mosaic. How does that, what's your analysis in terms of what their contributions are? Does that help you with some of the challenges that you have with what you have in your report?
It might. Currently, CenturyLink already has some fiber close to the highway shop. Novato would have to do a fiber build out. So I guess if, assuming that Novato gets grant funding, then they would be on equal footing with CenturyLink for service. So
What did you think of the presentations?
Well, I think both of them did a fairly good job. The Mosaic was a little more technical, but you know, they seem to have their act together. We're already a Novato customer, and in my opinion, I think they provide very good service. So, in my opinion, I think both have their technical background is good, but then it just comes down to policy and what's the way to get for the biggest bang for the buck.
So my question then to my last one. With your professional analysis of what you saw, is Novato's project, is that doable? Is that an achievable goal?
from, as far as what they've historically been able to do, I would say yes, definitely.
Anything else from Mr. Colson? All right.
Their report, but that's what I know about it.
You probably have a comment on this. What is Justice Point? They are over capacity already, and we knew that. What are your, do we have a thought in what we're gonna do there? Are we thinking about adding another person? Is there?
Well, I think part of it is the process. You know, they are going to move to a different screening tool that allows them to not only conduct those without a face-to-face on every inmate, but also to provide that information to the judge so that he can make decisions about, you know, the stipulations that people are out on jail. So, you know, currently there are 118 people within that needing the supervision from Justice Point. You know, does it need to be that high? I mean, we're tossing everybody their direction.
Well, it's not that we're tossing. It's what's being asked from the court is, and it's a public safety issue. If someone's coming in on a charge, the court is more inclined to release that person on a bond, any type of bond, as long as there's some type of accountability for that person's conduct. And because we are so backlogged on, I say we, because it's Tom left me hanging with the court commissioner stuff, but we're so backlogged on that, we're trying to do in custodies almost every day. And so we're trying to alleviate the jail population from exploding, because it's about to explode, and we're not even fully into summer. So I don't know. I got a feeling that if they reassess what their assessment tool is, it's going to be irrelevant, because the court's still going to rely on them, regardless of what it is, for anybody coming through there. Because the standing order now on a bond is Justice Point, and then Justice Point sits in on the in custodies, and they'll say we don't have the capacity. So we'll put as a condition of bond Justice Point if they can get in there, so that there's a public safety. You know, so if someone acts out, you can say, well, you just released this person. No, we released this person with the idea that they're maybe going to get services. So what their assessment tool is going to be irrelevant. What we really need to do is what Tweed was saying, is either get capacity on the county side, or we need to start really trying to reestablish the capacity we had before, because McNamara and Burgum combined had a way to alleviate it, so that there was someone out at Bijiki that could help offset that. Because some of these 118 that are coming through there is failure to appear, FTAs is what they call them. And so we could alleviate it on two parts. So if we could get them to do the screening at Bijiki, they have a better chance of getting there, participating. How was that? We never got a report. Did we ever get a report on that toxilizer that we set up at the jail? Is that even working, or is that still in place?
Oh, that breathalyzer?
Right.
Yeah.
So we should look at that. And then, because here's the part that we're not seeing yet. We're only looking at pre-sentencing. We haven't even gotten into the sentencing component, which is what we really were hoping to get from Justice Point. So the pre-sentencing allows us to connect them to CCS and the voluntary services, which then makes it easier for the sentencing components, because then the judge, and hopefully judges, have a chance to see that someone who's been charged out is taking the affirmative steps to address that, like they're going to treatment, or they've been sober for so many days in a row or months in a row. So the assessment tool is a red herring. What we really need is the capacity on the tribal side, and we have to get ready for the part two, which is when we start getting these cases starting being adjudicated, and then that's where we were hoping that Justice Point would be, because then we got programming, and that's where we got House of Hope, and the CJCC was working on that. So the answer to that question is we really need to look at if we have the capacity to add another staff member for them, and it's, if we add that fix, we can do it across the board. But also really exploring the tribal side in terms of what we can do in terms of opening up services through Bijou.
Good point. Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Human Resources? Now we'll move on to number 10, American Rescue Plan Act funding update. Okay. Mr. Mr. Hoff. Public hearing discussion. I know Mr. Slender brought this up as an option or something for consideration. It's here for discussion. You had some concerns with the public hearing.
Well, we had some discussion in finance this morning about, the allocation of those funds. So what we talked about in finance was that I would do a presentation at the county board next week, just kind of outlining the qualified expenditures, what we could spend those funds on. One of which, of course, is broadband, but there's other things that program could help with. So getting a better understanding amongst the board members on the possible uses of those funds and how we decide on how we're going to allocate that. We've got 3.2 million, of which we've received 1.6 so far. And those funds need to be expended or encumbered by the end of 24. We had presentations on a couple of broadband proposals this morning in the joint session. There goes, 400,000 or 500,000 of our money. But we've also got to consider, as we talked about in finance, the town contributions. They get a chunk of change too. Like Lenwood gets 128,000. What are they going to spend that on if it's not broadband? I think we need to or start coordinating better with the towns on those kinds of things. We've got other areas of the county that will also want broadband, and we'll have to fund or potentially fund as well. So, between working with the towns, working with the tribe, there's another state allocation, all those different pots of money need to be coordinated to use it most efficiently and most effectively. So we can have a better discussion about that at the full county board. And then as we get into committees in July, you should have a better foundation of what kind of things that we can be looking at. I'll also be meeting with the department directors to, put the ideas in their head, and they can share ideas back with us on potential items. There's things that qualify and things that don't qualify. So we got to set those out as well.
Sure.
So that's kind of where we're at so far with that.
Anyone else? I look forward to that.
Is there any merit to having a public, I know there's a merit to having a public hearing, but is there any institutional history about meeting with the town boards? Has that ever happened?
I represent a few town boards and I try to go to their meetings, give them updates twice a year. I'm thinking about what you asked about public hearing. I'm thinking about Mr. Huff saying we need to communicate with the towns. I'm trying to think how is the best way to do that. And it might be through Lynn to communicate with maybe a little newsletter saying this is what we're presently doing with these on broadband. In the future, there's going to be a plan. Are you able to help with some kind of funding? At the same time, thinking about a public hearing, I don't want to have a public hearing yet until we know what the rules are. People are going to make suggestions, which is common, but it might not be covered under the rules. So, it's a give and take there.
But if we wait for the federal government to come out with the treasury rules, we're not going to,
That's true too.
it'll be 2026.
Well, you're going to give some guidelines next week, correct?
Well, they did come out with the interim
Yeah.
final rules, and we've received 2 updates since then, one at the end of May and one on Tuesday, just updating interpretations of what we can spend money on. So that continues to change slightly, but the baseline, the foundation of what we can spend money on is out there and available.
Did the county receive money in the CARES Act?
Yes, we did.
Because here's what I've been learning is the list of allowable things under CARES Act was this in 1 month, then the next month, and then the next month, and then the next month, and then the next month. And in between there was the deadline for how the funds were to be encumbered. So there's a real possibility that the Treasury guidelines are not going to be consistent with what our encumbrance requirements are. And so I'm concerned. I'm really literally split mind. You don't want to open this door up and make everyone raise their expectations that we're going to fix these things, because 3.2 million as a singular sum seems like a lot. But when you start looking at these different projects, we're already looking at what, $1 million of that 1.3 point something for broadband, and that only hits 2 townships and a sliver of what we have for the county. And if we open up the door on a public hearing, then we're going to get this top-down type of conversation where county boards decided what's the best interest for the county, and we've decided this, and then we open up the criticism. Flip side, if we don't start this conversation with the townships, I think we're gonna miss this opportunity. And I think a strategic plan on what a broadband expansion is really important. I think it really needs to happen. And Mr. Paulson, we should really recognize the work he's done, because what he's assembled right now has been the most substantive contribution we've had to broadband in this county since I've been on the county board. And I think that model needs to go forward, because I think if we explain that, what Mr. Paulson has put together, to the full community, all the communities, I think we'll have a better opportunity for informed participation, rather than just saying, well, we're waiting for Treasury, we're waiting for Treasury, we're waiting for Treasury. So.
Oh, I agree too. Lynn, do you think you and Bruce could get together on a letter to the towns and kind of what we're looking at, and what other townships have already committed that this is their plan?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, who's that?
Linda Zilmer, I'm sorry to jump in here. I was not recognized in the previous meeting, but I would like to comment now that I think some of what I heard in the previous 2 meetings is a good direction for the county to go. Number 1, to identify and prioritize how these funds can be used, but also to have a process to better vet the proposals that come to you. Using this morning as an example, Novato provided an exhibit that had 2 options for county funding. When it came time for Mosaic's presentation, their exhibit showed an amount, but I heard no one question whether they could still do this project with something less than $400,000. And I think that should have been a question to be asked. The other thing I was not recognized for, and maybe Supervisor Kinsley can jump in, CenturyLink, and I can't pinpoint whether it was 4 years ago or 3 years ago, but CenturyLink went all the way up and down Highway F, which was that blue line. So I would have gladly helped out with identifying what those lines were on the Mosaic map. So if CenturyLink has already come through with something, what is it that Mosaic is proposing? And I think Mr. Schlender also had a good idea that the county needs to have a strategic plan, because when you have so many little players and they are competitors, who is the one that's coordinating this? So Mr. Kinsley, do you know what CenturyLink put in 3-4 years ago or whatever it was?
Well, thank you, Ms. Elmer. We'll have Mr. Kinsley answer that, and then we got to move on. Go ahead, Mr. Kinsley.
No, I don't know exactly what they put in, but if they put in like winter, could use a little help.
Okay, thank you. All right, any more discussion on the public hearing? I think we have a good plan going forward. Lynn, are you good with that?
Yes.
Great comments, Jim. Thank you. All right, moving on then to number 11, County Administrator's Report. Mr. Hoff.
Good morning.
Thanks.
All right, I did get an outline to you this morning. As far as COVID is concerned, there was some COVID in the jail the last couple of weeks. Jail staff was working with Health Department, Julia Lyons and her staff to get things squared away, and they do have all COVID out of the jail at this point, so that's a good thing. The court has also lifted their masking restrictions, which is helpful because they kind of had a hold on our assembly room and our other conference rooms in case there were jury trials, and we almost got kicked out a couple of committee meetings, but that will alleviate some of the stress on our conference room, so that's good. COVID also is causing a delay in the redistricting. The census that was supposed to occur in 2020 got delayed, so they didn't get the data out in time for counties and municipalities to do their redistricting. So there's legislation being contemplated as we speak to change the statute to allow for that to be delayed a bit. If they didn't do that legislative change, then counties have no option to be out of compliance because the way the law is written, certain things have to happen by certain dates and they can't happen because we don't have the data. So that legislation is going through now. The bottom line for county board supervisors is that there still would be elections next year, but they would be in the existing districts, and then the redistricting wouldn't take effect until the next election cycle. We talked about the ARPA funds a bit. We talked a little bit in finance about analyzing the lost revenue component of that. If we were able to claim some lost revenue due to COVID, we could use some of those funds to claim as lost revenue, and then that kind of frees up the purpose on what we can use those monies for. But I don't think we're going to be able to utilize that part of the of the guidance. And then we'll talk about the qualified expenditures and how we're going to analyze those, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the board meeting. On the court renovation side, we have selected Myron Construction as the construction manager. We've scheduled a meeting next Tuesday to work with Venture Architects and Myron staff and our staff just to kind of get coordinated. And then there's another meeting scheduled, I think the 23rd or 24th, to meet with like the judge's staff and clerk of courts and all the other affected departments and start working on the official design of that. Any questions or comments on court renovations?
Other than, excuse me, Mr. Chapa, other than Mr. Hensy last night at Public Works mentioned that we may have extra meetings scheduled in front of the county board meeting next week if we do get the Myron contract approved.
Yeah, thank you. So the venture contract has been approved, and that'll be on the county board agenda. The Myron contract, they're still working through the AIA, the standard contract, and modifying that to meet our needs. And so if we get that done to the satisfaction of Myron and court counsel representation, we'll get that on the board agenda. But before it can get to the board agenda, we would run it through those committees. So if they get it done in time to get to the county board, we'll convene those committees to take a look at it before it gets to the board, so that the proper channels are gone through before the board sees it. And then if it can't be done by county board, we'll be asking Myron, just to stick to the schedule. We've got a couple kickoff meetings scheduled, and we'll proceed with those pending the final contract blessing in July if it doesn't happen in June.
So if we, being privy to the contractual discussions and aware of what the actual delay, it's not a delay, it's more just an analysis that's coming from the various attorneys, which, it's great putting their billables up, but that would be grounds for calling a special meeting for the full board to approve that contract, right? Because we're trying to, if we have to get things started because the material costs are astronomical now. And I think that, we're calling all these other special meetings. Can we just get one more? We can't get everything done before that, instead of waiting till the end of July to get a formal approval to start this project.
If there is a delay, if Myron is going to continue doing what they need to do, we wouldn't necessarily need to have to. But if they're going to say, we are not going to do any work until this gets ratified, then certainly we can consider.
Well, our council's not going to allow us to move forward until it's ratified. That's the issue. So we'd be acting outside of legal counsel because our attorney wants to make sure that there's no, I guess for lack of a better word, loose ends in the contract itself. But there was, that's why I had a kind of a difficult time with the analysis that was coming, because there was nothing that was identified as a sticking point, but there was a reason why we couldn't get it done in the framework that we needed for the full board. And then we've got these procedures for the ad hoc, and then it's public works, and then it's county board, which it's necessary, right, to state statutes. It just, we're going to bureaucratize ourselves to the point where we're going to delay this project unnecessarily, costing more money.
I think, Mr. Hoff, if you and the court counsel could keep that ad hoc committee informed of. any
Yeah,
movement
certainly,
or
yeah.
whatever.
So far there, I mean, the only delay is trying to get information from Myron and back to Myron, and I mean, it
So
does,
things might move right along if those two connect.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
on the airport side, they've got some remodeling going on underway. Currently, they're repaving the taxiways. I think the airport is going to be closed for a few days while they do some of that work. And then the terminal actually is being remodeled as well at the same time. So it's going to be a good project when we get those things done. The board will see some new hangar leases coming through probably in July or August, September. Those are the new leases that we kind of talked about before. Time Clock Plus, we're still implementing departments one at a time as we kind of start that that mechanism of recording time throughout the county. Budgets, we've got the budgets out to departments, and so we'll start having department meetings on the budget and coordinating that with the ARPA funding and that sort of thing. And also the cash flow and the debt issuance for the capital items and the courtroom, working through those processes as well. We've had some air conditioning issues. Obviously, it got hot in a hurry. The jail has got a new air conditioning unit, and it's struggling to keep up as they kind of tweak that to get its potential up to what it's supposed to do. It would have been nice to have a little cooler weather while they started that up the first time, but it's, and then there were a couple other air conditioning issues around the county too that Tim is working on, so that's good. If you go down by the clerk and treasurer's office, you'll notice, you know, the front window, that what used to be the clerk's office is not an open public counter. It's all back in the treasurer's area to just help alleviate some of the need for two open counters and the personnel needed to man two open counters. So we've been working with Lynn and Diane on some cross training there and efforts to improve that for the customer experience. We talked about Justice Point. We've had some discussion about some carbon credits in the forestry department. That's some counties are looking at selling their carbon credits essentially. You know, we've got county forest that is green, and we can sell those credits to people who are not carbon neutral. So it is an effort that would generate some revenue for the county. That'll be coming through Land Committee as we get more information about that.
We're talking about a lot of lawyer,
Pardon me?
we're talking about a lot of
vendors.
Yes, we are.
We are.
Sort of office.
I mean, it's potentially,
Your staff is.
you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue that could be generated through that product.
That's coming through forestry.
Yes. So that's what I've got today, unless you've got questions on other items.
Yeah, because you kind of under this point, Jim, the caseload there. I guess now would be the time under budget and coordinate with ARPA funding would be, do we want to clean up the motion made in finance that's coming to the full county board regarding the use of some of the ARPA funds? Is this the time?
It's not on the agenda though, so it was on the agenda, I should have covered forward. And I think we could probably, if we wish to do that, include it full board because it'll be on the agenda full board.
Yes,
That's
well,
how
we
they
could
can.
amend it there.
Thank you for mentioning that, that helped me.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hoff. Anything else from Mr. Hoff? Great report. If not, number 12, future agenda items. Any correspondence, other matters for discussion only. Anyone? If not, thank you you all. We are adjourned.